This is Dr. Adam Rindy, your host of the One Thing podcast. Welcome to episode 103, where we speak with Ron Pevny on conscious eldering. Ron has dedicated 45 years to assisting people in navigating life transitions, emphasizing purpose and passion in their journey. He is a published author and the founding director of the Center for Conscious Eldering. Throughout his career, Ron has been instrumental in supporting individuals and creating meaningful elder years. In his newly expanded and updated edition of the book, Conscious Living, Conscious Aging, Ron shares how you can not only survive, but thrive in your later years. He runs workshops and retreats throughout North America that foster purpose, growth, and commitment to service in the later stages of life. As you'll hear in our discussion, Ron has a very empowering view on the aging process and the eldering years. For further information about Ron and his work, please visit centerforconsciouseldering.com. In this episode, we focus on what conscious eldering is, how to approach aging with purpose, passion, and well-being, and how this contrasts with societal norms that often lack an empowering vision for aging. Ron shares his journey, which began in 1979 with a calling to help people during life transitions, evolving into rites of passage work and leading to the founding of the Center for Conscious Eldering in 2010. We delve into his process, the retreats, and his work with eldering. Ron provides valuable philosophical insights on how to approach eldering consciously. I really enjoyed speaking with Ron as a guide for my own process and for understanding what parents and loved ones experience as they transition through elder years. Enjoy the episode. If you would be so kind as to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends and loved ones, we will be able to continue to provide this great content. So without further ado, welcome to the next episode of the One Thing podcast. This is the One Thing podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Adam Rindy. The One Thing podcast brings together leaders in functional and naturopathic medicine to discuss actionable information that may unlock puzzles in the areas of gut health, brain health, metabolism, and longevity. Please note, these episodes do not replace the opinion of your doctor. They are not intended to diagnose or treat any condition. Please discuss this information with your provider and discuss your own unique personal health history before adapting this information. Please subscribe to our episodes so that you can stay on top of the most current information in these areas of medicine. Ron, welcome to the One Thing podcast. I'm delighted to have you here with us today.
Well, thank you, Adam. I'm delighted to be with you.
Thank you. Yes, I thought we'd get started just hearing more about your work that you do with conscious eldering and kind of helping us understand what that term means. And it'd be great to hear about conscious eldering. What is conscious eldering from your perspective?
Well, as I see it, conscious eldering is a paradigm or an understanding of how we can age, how we can move into our elder chapters with a sense of purpose and passion and well-being and commitment and growth and service, rather than just drifting into getting old. It's about consciously approaching our aging rather than just letting it sort of happen to us. And there's so many facets to it, but a lot of it has to do with intentionality. A lot of it has to do with deepening our understanding of who we are, what is our most authentic inner voice, our most authentic gifts. It's such a contrast to the lack of an empowering vision for aging, which seems to predominate in our modern society.
Yeah. I'm curious. I kind of want to come back to that because there's just so many different views on eldering throughout the world, right? So,
yes.
And I want to kind of touch upon that in a second, but how did you personally get into this work? How did this become your calling?
Well, I will take a 2-hour story and try to put it into a couple or 3 minutes, Adam. I learned back in about 1979 when I completed my graduate training at the California Institute of Integral Studies in East-West counseling psychology. I learned right about that time that I had a sense of calling for helping people move through life transitions, helping to support them in using life transition to grow. I ended up finding I think it was a total act of grace. I ended up finding the two people who are usually regarded as the ones who have reintroduced the concept of rites of passage to our non indigenous modern culture, Stephen Foster and Meredith Little. I became one of their first apprentices. And after I completed my work with them, I ended up moving back to Colorado, which is where I'm from, and starting one of the first modern wilderness rite of passage organizations. And that has been my passion for many, many, many years. I have not been able to make a living doing it. Not too many people who leave wilderness rites of passage make a great living. So I've had to do other things like corporate creativity training and educational consulting. But that's where my heart and my energy and my love have always been, is helping people with rites of passage to move through transition. Now, fast forward a bunch of years, and when I was in my early 50s and began to recognize that I'm perhaps not immortal, I'm actually aging, a big, big revelation. As I was pondering the lack of any kind of meaningful programs to help people move into elderhood, about that same time, I was invited by two wise elders, 15 years older than me, to join them in creating some kind of envisioning and creating some kind of a rite of passage to help prepare people to grow into a fulfilled elderhood. And so we created a program called Choosing Conscious Elderhood. I began to see the incredible impact it had on people who were seeking some kind of an empowering vision for their aging. And I began to see that this was indeed going to be my work, my way of helping people move through transition, for as far as I could see into my future. My two older partners ended up reaching the age where they couldn't do the work anymore. They passed the torch to me. I created the Center for Conscious Eldering in 2010, and I've been offering retreats and workshops and seminars and doing writing ever since then to support the development of conscious elders.
Wow. It's really a fascinating path. And the work that you did earlier when you were helping with wilderness rites of passage, was that for all ages, lifespans, or was it for a specific group of people?
No, at that point, Adam, it was pretty much for people from 20 until whatever. So we had all ages. And there are certain basic dynamics that are common to any of life passages. And so what we offered, I think, was relevant to people going through any kind of a passage. Whereas my work now is really focused on people in that very real and significant passage from midlife adulthood into what is indeed a distinct life stage called elderhood. And that is indeed my focus now.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah, I once did something like a wilderness rites of passage for an organization that was called the Mankind Project.
Oh, yes, I know about them.
Yeah, so that was a really great experience for me, pivotal time in my life, just to kind of get clear with like my mission in life and calling. That was a very powerful experience. So, kind of going back to the first thing we talked about, and you said that the definition of conscious eldering, and if we were to travel throughout the world, would and we were to do like a sample of all the cultures and indigenous cultures, would we see that eldering is more conscious worldwide and it's just less conscious in Western societies? Or what would we see if like you were to sample the world populations?
Well, I haven't sampled the world population, but it is definitely the case that among various people that we might call indigenous people, or people who have lifestyles where they are close to the land, close to the natural rhythms of nature, um, the whole concept of elderhood is still strong and still important. It's mostly in industrialized societies that have lost touch with the natural rhythms of the world around us and with our own natural rhythms that the whole concept of life having discrete stages of growth, the whole concept of elderhood has really largely been lost. And meaningful, empowering rites of passage have largely been lost. I know in Europe they have the same kind of situation we have here in the United States. They just don't have a meaningful role for older adults. Whereas throughout history and still in some parts of the world, older adults are revered, and not just revered because they're old, but they have a meaningful role. And they have the role of modeling enduring values for young people, the ones who remind their societies of the importance when we make decisions of looking toward the future generations, toward the seventh generation. You oftentimes hear that metaphor. They're the ones who are expected to be the storytellers, the wisdom keepers for the people, to help young people understand enduring values and what's truly important. And that's a meaningful role. And in our society, that role has largely been lost. We glorify youth instead.
Yeah, that's really well said. I mean, I think there's been recently a lot of information and supportive studies about the role that elders have with grandchildren or younger children and importance of that role, but not so much expanded beyond that. Is there sort of more support for elders to sort of focus on being grandparents and that role and not so much other important roles?
Well, I think in the society we live in, for many older adults, about the only honored role that they can see is the role of being a grandparent. And some people, I think, do it consciously, and some people bring to their grandkids the same unconsciousness with which they live their lives. What they're modeling basically is how to live unconsciously. And that's why ultimately conscious eldering is it's a process of growth, of growing into being an elder, not just going to a weekend workshop or reading a good book and claiming I'm an elder, but it's growing into a state of being and into a role. And not everybody's able to do that. And not everybody with their grandkids is able to model growth. That's something we learn how to do.
Mm-hmm. So when people are getting to this life transition stage where they're moving into elderhood, what kinds of things do you hear people are going through, and what's important to what are the themes that are important that come up in your work?
Well, we offer these week-long retreats. And we admittedly get a select group of people, the kind of people who are questing, who are seeking something more than what mainstream culture has to offer. And so I'll start with that. But among those people, the biggest concerns that we hear are that as they age, and especially as they may retire from careers or just work, if they haven't really had a meaningful career, they just work. There's a concern about being irrelevant, about being isolated, about not having any meaningful role to play. They just wonder, why am I here? I've got a bunch more years. And we are so fortunate, as in your work, that if people take halfway decent care of themselves, they can live a lot longer than people have generally lived for a long time. But what's the purpose in those years? And people are wondering that. Is the purpose just to do my best to play every day and desperately try to find some security, or is there a larger purpose for these years, for this gift of a longer life? And those are the kind of questions people are bringing to our retreats.
Yeah. I mean, I talk with a lot of people who are moving into elderhood in my work, and I would agree with you that those are some of the themes. But I'd also hear a lot of people being really concerned about the world that they're leaving or
Mhm.
potentially leaving, and they're it's almost a very unique thing that I hear. It's like they're concerned about the planet. They're concerned about like society and about where it's all going, more so than maybe in the kind of the kind of working years and raising kids years. And it's almost like looking back and saying, you know, almost more concerned about being a steward.
Yeah, yeah, and there are a lot of people who have that concern. Even though I would suggest, Adam, that people who have that concern, the kind of people who come to our retreats or read books like mine, are by and large outliers. It really seems like the majority of older adults in our culture are primarily concerned with finding whatever pleasure they can get with security. And but the kind of people who come to our retreats are the people who want to know, well, how can the sense of purpose that I'm searching for, how can that sense of purpose help to create a better world, a healthier planet, a healthier culture to leave to our descendants? So that's definitely a concern among people who are more conscious, I would say.
Yeah, it seems. Well, what's the resistance? It seems like that's a really worthwhile pursuit. What's the twist in the story? I mean, it seems like it should all. There's plenty of areas to put energy. So why does there have to be so much effort in carving this out? It seems like there's a huge need for people to help.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I don't know. I think by and large, Adam, we live in a world or in a culture that is very, very much grounded in individualism, and it is not grounded in nearly as much as many other countries in community and in a sense of responsibility to the larger whole. And so I think that in our culture, the values that have been embedded in us very much have to do about our own satisfaction and our own pleasure and the things that can feed our egos, and not how we can contribute to the greater good. And that's why work like conscious aging, a lot of personal and spiritual growth work is oriented toward helping people see that we are embedded in something much bigger, and we have responsibility to that much larger community, the earth itself, the human community, the non-human community. It takes personal growth work and commitment, I think, to reach the kind of point that you're asking about and that is so very important to me.
Yeah, I'm just wondering more so if I understand the issues around individualism and kind of focusing on our own goals, but I'm just wondering if there's a block to receiving support from the elder community that is a real obstacle. Like, is there sort of a resistance from maybe in their younger years for
Mhm.
receiving help?
Yeah, I definitely think there is. I think that you could not argue against the statement that we live in a world and a culture that glorifies youth. And it's the young people who are on top of the very latest developments in technology. And the world, I mean, it used to be in societies that honored elders that it was the elders who taught the young people crafts and trades, and the young people apprenticed with them. But in the world we live in now, the elders aren't generally the ones who teach the younger people those things. And so elders are more and more seen as irrelevant. It's the younger people can learn and who can teach all the very latest technology and all those things in a rapidly changing world. And so, values like how to live a good life, what are those enduring values? Those aren't the kind of things younger people want to hear that much. They mostly want to hear about who can help me with to be on top of the very latest whatever. And so there is a huge gap between the young and the old. And I think I'd say one more thing about that, Adam. We need more people stepping up as true elders to serve as models for young people, even for the young, children, to show them that yes, elders can play a very meaningful role. They have something important to give. But if we don't have elders stepping up and modeling this, then how are young people going to see that elders can actually have something of great value to give to the community? We need to model what we're professing that we're aiming.
Yeah. So when you're meeting with people at your retreats, are they, because you said that it's just very sort of selective group that comes to see you,
Yes.
are they coming in from a standpoint of they're already working on what this means, or are they coming in from a standpoint of wanting to get clarity and they're like starting at the beginning? Where are they at emotionally and kind of connected to this work when they're starting to work with you?
I think that's a very good question. Most of the people who are going to invest a week of their lives, and the money that it takes to come to a retreat, are people who already have some understanding of personal growth and spiritual growth. Now, some of our people have been on a personal growth path for a long time. Some of the people have done a lot of reading, maybe been to other workshops and things on conscious aging or positive aging or their various names for a new vision of aging. But there are other people who are fairly pretty much at the beginning. But by and large, it is people who already have some understanding of the importance of personal and spiritual growth.
Hmm. Okay. So more of fine tuning, their plan or their vision, kind of taking it to the next level when they're working with
Yeah,
you. Okay.
that's right. And for many people, the vision is really, really vague. Many people they come to retreats and they have a sense that there must be something possible that could be satisfying way to age. They sense it in their gut. They sense frustration with the lack of that kind of vision in our modern world. And they want, almost desperately and urgently, they want some kind of a vision of what can be possible for them and some guidance as to what they need to do so they could grow into that possibility. And they don't just want a whole bunch of happy talk about how aging is all just a bunch of bliss and happiness and joy, the whole anti-aging method. They want a vision that also includes an understanding that there are going to be a lot of losses, a lot of diminishments as we age. There's going to be pain and grief involved, but they want to see how they can honor that reality and develop resilience in dealing with that reality, but also see how they can put their precious life energy into things that enhance their life and enhance the community around them.
So with some of the exercises you do with people, looks like you do things like something called life review and death
Hmm.
death lodge. Some of these kind of exercises. Can you kind of take us through some examples of what these processes involve and where they're leading people?
Yeah, well, I'd be happy to. I think where I would start in answering that question, Adam, is to share that in any kind of significant life transition, and I'm particularly talking about now the transition from what we call midlife adulthood into the elder chapters. You can't just take more and more and more baggage with you. Any transition requires letting go of things that no longer fit you. You've outgrown them, they're not serving you, so that you can move forward with clear energy and without old baggage. And so, life review, there are many different aspects to life review, but life review is intentionally spending time taking a look at your life and seeing what is that baggage that it just will not serve me to carry forward with me. Oftentimes, people have resentments, unforgiveness of themselves and others that is heavy, and you carry that with you. And that takes energy. That saps energy that could be used elsewhere. Oftentimes, people have stories they've told themselves forever about not being worthy, about not being deserving, about being victim. Old stories that do not serve us, and they certainly won't serve us in our elderhood. And we have to find ways by looking at our life of seeing that those stories may not be true. And that rather than being a victim and, this happened and that happened, consider the possibility that if our life is a journey of growth, which I believe it is from beginning to end, then those experiences have the potential, still have the potential to somehow further our growth rather than feed our stories of victimhood. And so those kind of things are aspects of life review that can be so important. One other, it's not just about negatives, but if we're looking toward how we're going to find purpose and meaning in service and our life ahead of us, a great way to engage in that search is to take a look throughout our lives and see what brought me most alive. What brought me the most joy? When did I feel that I was most fulfilled? What were those gifts I was using that brought me most alive? Because that will give me a clue as I look toward the future as to gifts and energies and passions that I can embrace in my elderhood. And so life, there are many ways of doing life review, and we focus on a bunch of them, but I'm trying to paint the larger picture of the value in doing life review.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's really clear how you explain that, and really resonates with how some concepts I've heard about as we age, just getting lighter and lighter with, like you said, your baggage, but just even as a person symbolically, just the lightness and, going through the chapter of our life when we eventually do pass on. There's a lot to be said to just passing away with like a lightness of being.
Yeah, that's what we all hope for. And yet, many of the people who come in our retreats, many people who are friends and models for me, are people who work in hospice. And they talk about how difficult it can be for some people in their final weeks or days or hours when they have got all this stuff that has never been acknowledged, it's never been looked at, it's never been healed, it's never been processed. And so, if you want to get to the kind of point you're talking about, where at the end of your life there's a lightness and a sense of, yeah, it's all been a wonderful journey and it's all been a journey of growth and I've done it well, then you got to spend some time examining your life. And that's a critical part of this conscious eldering work.
Yeah, I mean, it's regrets, right? So those
Uh-huh.
those things come up. I mean, I've been with people as they're passing more than one occasion, and the regrets is always, it's a sad thing to hear and witness. But I can imagine, nobody leaves this planet without some regrets. But to be able to process them and have them out the open and conscious about them is probably a lot different than just having them stir inside you.
That's right. Because we can see regrets as these big mistakes or these things that happened in the past that, were blows we suffered, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. But we can also take a look at what regrets can teach us. What could we have learned from that in terms of perhaps ways that we could be a more loving being, a more conscious being? What can we learn rather than just carrying around these regrets like big heavy weights? The regrets are part of our journey of growth if we allow that, but they can also totally sap our self love and our self respect if we just hold on to them as victims and letting them feed these negative stories about ourselves.
hmm And the lifestyle of living this way, does this usually mean that when people come and do the work with you, that they go back to a community, their communities, and they have other people to connect with and continue the work, continue, sort of building on what they're learning? Or is it sort of like they come and then that's the end of the process?
We definitely hope that they don't come and get high for a week and then that's the end of the process. Yeah, we all have. And that's a major focus, especially toward the latter part of these retreats. When you go back home to normal life, You're not going to feel the same inspiration and the same high. What have you learned about yourself that you can integrate into your life in a way that is enduring and it's meaningful? We spend a lot of time focusing on helping people get in touch with their very best sense, Adam, of what their intentions are, what's truly most important for them in the different spheres of their life in their elder years, and how they can clear on intentions, how they can state them, how they can reinforce them, how they can look for community around them. You might call it conscious aging buddies, if you will, people who can support you in being true to your intentions and true to your vision. Because I really, really believe that whether it's conscious eldering or any other kind of significant personal growth, you cannot do it in isolation. You need to have community, even if it's just a very few people. You need to have other people who share your deepest values that you can support each other, because it's just too hard and too lonely to do it without community. And the voices of the culture around us oftentimes they do not support the best in us. Those voices are strong. And so we need some people around us that support the best in us and we can support their best. And so oftentimes when people leave our retreats, they choose, with some help from myself and my co-leaders, to agree that they're going to meet once a month on Zoom or something like that and just share the challenges and the joys and the aspirations. And many groups do that, and they find that's invaluable.
Just want to touch upon a couple things, just the obstacles that people run into for living this path. Like, what about stepping out of one's comfort zone as we get older? Is that something that you run into as being hard to deal with or harder to deal with as we get older, or is that just sort of something that's just assumed, but it's really not reality? For example, even like moving to a new home as I'm getting older is so much more challenging, or moving an office or changing a routine is so much more challenging as we get older. And I know there's reasons why, but I'm just also wondering, when you go from living, say moving into more of a conscious, active eldering place, you're putting yourself out there more, and you're probably changing the way you are in the world. Is that difficult for people more so than other stages in life?
I think it probably is. And maybe because the older we get, the more deeply entrenched our habits have become. If you're 70 years old and you've got a lot of habits and ways of being, they're going to be much more deeply entrenched than if you're a 10-year-old. And so I think the word conscious implies not living out of habit. And anytime we step out of habitual ways of being or thinking or saying or whatever, there's a level of discomfort. And so I think aging consciously, and I think growing at any point in life requires a willingness to be able to cultivate the habit of stepping out of our comfort zones. That doesn't mean every day you jump into some big frightening thing, but it means that you build into your life opportunities for consciously getting a bit uncomfortable and doing things or being in ways that might not be comfortable. Because I definitely believe it's true that any kind of growth cannot happen when we're in our comfort zone. By definition, comfort zone involves expanding the boundaries, stretching in ways that are uncomfortable. So we have to decide, how committed are we to growing, and then are we willing to at least do some stretching and building up some facility in that. And the more we're able to do that, and we see that it perhaps enriches our lives rather than being stuck in habits, then the easier it's going to be to more and more often step outside our comfort zones.
Yeah,
That makes sense, Adam?
it makes complete sense. And I want to piggyback on that, just personal experience that I've observed. And it's, having gone through work, having aging parents and one who's passed on, and just the experiences of like being a young person, not wanting to listen to, I know the answers to what they're saying, and there was a point where I decided just to shut up. And um, I couldn't believe when I would just sit back and let the process, let the conversation happen, the richness and the details and the minutia and the little kind of factors that would come out that were just so crystal clear if you just give enough time. And then, so at that moment, I've decided to apply that to all my elder friends. And I will say that stepping out of the comfort zone also comes with like a complete catalog of experiences of knowing how to make that experience successful and, to make it more comfortable and make it work better and all the
Hmm.
different nuances. Just the other day, I was driving somewhere with a friend of mine who's in his mid 80s and he's going on a trip out of the country. And he was telling me about his packing process and how he thinks about the bag he's going to take and how it's going to open and where it's going to zip. And because when he gets into the plane, he wants to have this particular item at the top. And because of his lived experiences, he knows how to make a potentially uncomfortable situation work better. I was like, this is brilliant because, a young person's just like, throw the stuff in the bag, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And just the fact that he's able to match his discomfort with the uncertainties of stepping out at his age with the comforts of knowledge and experience, I think is really valuable.
Yeah. I think I would say, Adam, that whatever stage in life you're in those times of significant transition, you have to choose to endure discomfort because letting go of an old way of being and an old way of identifying yourself, a lot of old habits, it's difficult and it's painful. And yet, what people have learned throughout history, and that's what makes rites of passage so important, they have learned that if you allow yourself to endure this, on the other side, there's a whole new beginning. And you might have let go of a bunch of stuff, but the gifts on the other side are incredible. And those are the gifts that come from a new sense of identity and a new sense of a life stage.
That's beautiful. It's like birthing, right? That's
Yes, very much.
that's beautiful. Well, that's a great place to kind of wrap up. Very enjoyable conversation with you. I'd love to hear kind of in closing how people can follow your work and just, mention anything about your next edition of your book that just came out. I'm just anything you'd like to share with us as closing thoughts about how people can work with you and any parting words.
Okay, thank you. We've got a website, and it is centerforconsciouseldering.com. That's a mouthful. Centerforconsciouseldering.com. There's a lot of useful information, articles. Many people feel there's a wealth of good information about how to age well on that website. The new edition of my book is going to be released on July 16th. The name is Conscious Living, Conscious Aging, and the subtitle is Embracing the Gifts of Elderhood. And you could find it anywhere that you would normally go to find your books.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll put links to it in our notes and show notes.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you. And any closing thoughts before we wrap up today?
First, I want to thank you for this conversation. I appreciate it. I appreciate your good, thoughtful questions. But I've read a little bit about the good work that you do, Adam, and your colleagues. And something we didn't really talk about, but I just want to say briefly, there is a wealth of research and wisdom from around the world that says that having a strong sense of purpose is perhaps the most important thing that can support our physical health and well-being.
Yeah.
And we're learning more and more. The most important thing that can support us in minimizing our chances of developing dementia and Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
And so, more you can find a sense of purpose. And just to define purpose, purpose is a reason for getting up in the morning that is bigger than just yourself, about something bigger. And I encourage your listeners, do your best to find a sense of purpose because that's going to support your overall well being, perhaps more than anything else that you can engage in your life.
Wonderful. That's a very helpful. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the One Thing Podcast. Please share these episodes with your friends, loved ones, colleagues, patients, healthcare providers, anyone who you feel might benefit from hearing these informative interviews. We tend to learn best from people sharing things with us. That's often the first time it's introduced. So don't hesitate if the content of these episodes reminded you of someone that might benefit from it. Forward the episode to them, and I'm sure they'll either appreciate it or be appreciative that you've thought of them. So once again, we'll look forward to seeing you next episode on the One Thing Podcast. And again, much appreciation for you being here with me.